Yo, let me
I'm
see if I
gonna
can get this all set up correctly.
Yep.
Okay,
You have
over here.
Yep. And you can start whenever you're ready.
Okie doke. Hey there, demons. It's your boy Tootie. We're gonna get into the exciting world of voice acting implementation. Just to go over a few things I've done in the past. I've been a VN dev since about 2015. I'm usually a writer, and that probably makes you wonder, like, why is a writer talking about voice acting implementation? The writers in the crowd, they already know that if you're a writer, you kind of have to take things into your own hands a lot of time if you're spearheading a project. So I list off a bunch of projects where I was largely trying to get voice acting implemented, trying to like get a team together and make sure everything was working correctly. And as it turns out, it's kind of tricky if you want to get like a really good job of it. So I want to like share some of the lessons I've figured out over the years. Uh, this is just the general process in a nutshell, but what the one thing that I super duper want to emphasize at all times is that you should not be approaching voice acting until you have a finalized script. Like you if you're drafting a script and you are getting close to like finalizing the editing stuff, you can like start putting together a VA team like maybe a month before. But if your script is in flux and it's going to adjust, then you just want that stuff finalized. You don't want to make changes because any change you make to the lines will affect the takes that the voice actors do, and that kind of messes up the entire process of this in a nutshell. And there's a lot to like factor in terms of like it's not simply a matter of getting the VAs to record and put them straight in the game. And I'm gonna like try and like dissect that a bit more as we go. But this is just the overall. So I highly recommend just getting a script finalized and make sure you're in a comfortable position. This is generally something I preach for all manners of asset production, like art, music, sound, and especially voice acting, because voice acting is one of the sexier things you can put in a VN in terms of like how you can appeal to a market, and it's something that readers look out for. It's something that publishers look out for, but it's also like one of the most time intensive and expensive things you can do. So you gotta be like prepared and try to cut costs whenever necessary, or not necessarily entirely cut costs, but try to make sure you measure twice, cut once is the general idea. One thing I figured out is that you really want a voice director if you're attempting like a bigger team project. Uh, the, generally, if you're running like a big enough team, you're going to have people in charge of different aspects of the game. You would have a writing director, you would have an art director, you would have a music director, but voice director kind of gets like overlooked in the process because there's a lot of like ambiguity and confusion. Uh, they do a lot of different things for you. They do a lot of coaching VAs, the best takes. Our usual setup is, since we can't get everybody inside one professional studio, we get people in a Discord call and we have the director coaching the takes while the voice actor is basically recording on their own end. So it helps give more better immediate feedback on how well their takes are doing, how they can improve. You can kind of do this yourself, but it's also good to delegate to a voice director if you're busy. And if you are heading up a project, you are going to be very busy. They also tend to have pretty good connections with the overall voice acting community, and they can probably like wink, wink, nudge, nudge the odd person, just kind of like, hey, look at this thing that my friend is working on. You might be interested in, and they can like direct people towards your project. It's a really good way to help get word of mouth out and helps you like basically cut to the chaff of like auditioning if you can get like personal recommendations of people who would be good for your project. And you're gonna need that because they're if once you get a casting call out, is gonna be, I think we were estimating like about 100 people before we say, I think we'll try to be a bit more low key about that. So you can definitely expect like a lot of people coming out to see these sort of things. Generally, a voice director is basically a good in between you and the rest of the voice actors that you hook up with, because they can like report difficulties to you. You can go like keep tabs on everything. It basically like lets you delegate a bit more, so you can focus on like more things that you will have the more direct skill set to deal with. Like generally for me on the writing end, trying to make sure the script is clicking. They're good for like offering voice feedback and expertise. Like if helps to have somebody like read your dialogue aloud if you are in the scripting phase, because sometimes you write something and it doesn't sound right if when it comes out of a person's mouth, and it sounded better in your head when you wrote it. So getting like feedback like this from a person who's experienced with like getting the best out of voice actors is a good way to feedback. They generally make everything better. Like there's there is no reason for you to not get one, just to like help things come together. I went without a voice director for like one of my earlier projects, and then I went with one for the sequel, and the improvement in all areas in terms of efficiency, things getting done, things getting implemented, quality takes, everything was better. It makes everything better if you just get someone to help you on board with that. You can kind of like give yourself general skills, but if you're already torn between three different ways on a different project, it helps get somebody specially for that. I'm going to do some low-key shilling for Sandra MJ because she was a voice actor for several of my projects. So if you need a voice actor, go and pay her money. It'll be a good time. She's good. We're going to talk a bit about the casting call, because there are things that voice actors are looking for that you want to make sure that your project is communicating properly, and you want to be like as clear with as much information as possible. This is partly why this is another reason I recommend that you make sure that you have basically a completed script and enough assets can kind of like show off, give an idea of where your project is going. It's just like summarize a plot, have a general estimate of line count. Character descriptions are extremely helpful just for like getting a feel for the character, and you can say a lot about a character with just an illustration, so people get a really good idea. Voice range, you pretty standard. Just like provide as much information as you can. Definitely like make a mention of any accents and like if there's a regional like disposition for the writing. And you always want to like prepare a few sample lines to read from. It's generally a mark of a poorly planned and poorly executed project if you are inviting like voice actors to make up their own lines for you. You are Odds are you are a writer or you have writers working for you. They should be writing the lines, not the voice actors. Uh, so I just want to elaborate on the point for encouraging ad-libbing, not improv. Improv kind of implies that they're making up the lines, but if they're ad-libbing a line that they already have because the original written line just doesn't really sound right, then they get a bit more of an opportunity to like play a little bit looser with that. So that's something you can encourage. You want to pay attention to the actual quality of the voice takes when you go in, because there'll be different problems. Like there's a wide variety of like mic and recording setups, and you just want to make sure that everything's spot on. This is something you kind of like sit down with the voice director to kind of like get a feel for, because not everything is immediately obvious. You want like the voice actor to have like a very loud, audible voice, because in terms of like audio editing later, it's always better to be loud instead of quiet. It's like take a piece of wood. Like it's easier to cut a hole in it than it is to add wood back onto the board. Like if you already made the cut, then you want to make sure that it's done right the first time. And it's much better to make it a voice louder, quieter, instead of louder. And you want to like make sure they're reducing background noise, and they want them to just have fun with the project and the lines that you're given. And yeah, and also another aside just for general representation, for one of our projects we ended up looking for trans voice actors to help represent a trans character, and we went around to a few communities on Twitter to just kind of like do some scouting for that. And I think that actually ended up working really well, because once you go looking for that sort of thing, then you find that there are people that are really enthusiastic and find it important to have their beliefs and their groups represented properly. And if you make that a priority of your project, you can definitely find the right people to either complement the project more or help like expand the work that you already have. So that was a pretty good success story on our part. We'd be happy to do that again. So something to keep in mind if you're working on a project where that would be relevant for. Important note on style guides. I'm a very plan-oriented writer, and I think that it's important to have style guides for basically all areas of your production, especially voice acting. You should be using them just like to inform, to keep people on the same page, especially if you're like working in a larger team. Even if you have like 3 or 4 people, and it's good to just like have a style guide so everybody can agree on this one thing. And this is particularly important for voice acting because you get people from all over who have different pronunciations of similar words. And generally, you want to make sure that these stylistic choices are consistent, especially if you're working on something for sci-fi, you're making up special names for the cause. And I'm going to use an example, kind of like cite something that went wrong. So for our first game, my girlfriend is a demon summoned from the depths of hell. Our studio culture basically indicates that the names will get longer until morale improves. We have one character. Her name is Estan. Uh, so her general deal is that she's basically Satan, and we put in the reverse pentagram to like indicate the star, but in scripted is just Estan. So we didn't have a style guide for this particular pronunciation. We kind of intended the pronunciation just to be Estan, but when we gave the script to the voice actors, we got different kinds of results. We got normal Satan, which is understandable because it's literally Satan of Wrath. That isn't a huge problem. We got Satan, which is not the correct pronunciation of Satan, and then we just Stan. Stan was my favorite. I don't know how that happened, but generally, if you want to have consistent voice acting throughout the project, it's less. It basically maintains the immersion better if you manage to stick to one pronunciation of a given name instead of having 4 or 5 different pronunciations. So having that determined ahead of time means less confusion for the voice actors, and you can settle on something very quickly without the need for retakes down the line, because any retakes is generally more time and more money on your part to correct. Audio engineering, you can definitely outsource some audio engineering to people involved, but if you are working independently, this is probably something that you want to learn to figure out on your own. I generally use Audacity for all my purposes, but once you get voice lines, like you need to like make sure that the lines are being read crisply, there's no background noise, there's a you gotta make sure the lines are spliced properly so they can go into the game. For RenPy format in particular, .ogg format is the preferred manner of implementing general voice acting. Uh, Basically, you want to just go. Sometimes voice actors will do their own mastering in general. You kind of need to ask about that ahead of time. It'll save you a bit of work on your end, but it's generally something that has to get done. You can't just put in the audio files raw because mistakes tend to happen. So there are some things you can do. I put up an example of what Audacity might look like. You can kind of see where like the audio spikes and valleys. That's generally like the general level of volume that you would like, and just splice them into different audio files in general. Uh, it's an enormous manpower workload in general. If so, you gotta like plan for it, because just imagine like a regular game, you can probably expect several hundred lines even for just a short game. And we had about 2,000 lines for like our 40,000 word script a few times. And you gotta make sure you gotta go over every single individual line unless you find a decent way to automate it. We do have we have some useful Python script that can basically implement voice acting throughout the script, but that doesn't discount the fact that you still need to look at every single voice file, every single take. Usually multiple takes, because getting multiple takes of a given line is generally preferred. And you want to try and select the best one as you go. It's generally a lot of work to implement voice acting, but it is worth it at the end. It helps you cultivate like different relationships and proper working relationship with people if you are aware of the costs and the work and the man hours that go into it. So you want to have like a better estimate of like the general costs that go into hiring people, the general time you have to put in as a creator to implement the voice acting. And yeah, but voice acting, as previously mentioned, is a very like it's a very good marketing point. It's something that you can kind of like point to it. You can point to it on your store description, and it will draw attention. It does make products better. Like it does make your writing better if you get good voice acting that complements it because of like the emotional delivery. Like I was skeptical about it. I was definitely skeptical about implementing voice acting for a long time. Then we actually got it, and it's so nice. It brings everything to life. And if you're going to be working in VNs, it's an audio visual medium. Like you got sprites, you got music, you got sound effects, and implementing proper voice acting is just like another evolution of that process. And it can work out really well for you if you are able to like leverage the right people, leverage the right manpower, and just like put your resources into the right areas and come up with like the most practical solutions to make sure you measure twice, cut once. And you'll make a lot of friends this way, and everybody's looking for a good time, everybody's looking for work, and it will bring a lot more attention to your project if you are basically bringing people in, like the good people that can do the right work for you. Thanks for watching. I think I'm about wrapped up for that. If anybody has any questions, hit me up.
I actually had one. It was, do you feel that as the writer, you should be present when the VAs are recording their lines so that you can correct any, say, like, if you want them to put emphasis on a certain word and they're not doing so?
Good question. That is a good practice. That's definitely practical to use. The only fallback is if you might not have time for it, which is generally something you can like have a voice director handle in your stead. But if you have the time, resources, and just like general availability, you can definitely sit in and as a spectator and kind of like do minor corrections on your own end. So yeah, sitting on a recording session is definitely good if you have the time for it. But if you don't have the time for it, that's something you can leave to a voice director. Let me see the chat.
People are like asking about like roughly costs, and like
yeah. Oh yeah, costs. There was a talk from last year about the general costs you can expect for hiring a voice actor. I recommend seeing that particular talk just for like getting a feel for costs. Different voice actors will charge different rates. You often see things like charging for a line or charging by hour. Depending on how you structure it, you'll probably like generally aim for by the line for smaller projects. But if you're doing a significantly like larger project with lots of lines to record, it might work out if you pay by out the hour instead, just so you can get the best. Retakes happen in terms of like having to basically redo a line because because the delivery isn't right or a word got mispronounced. That's generally like negotiable based on the voice actor, but if it's a general mistake on their part, they'll generally redo it. There's a good talk from last year that involved generally paying the voice actors and the general cost of actual hiring voice actors. That would be a good watch. Let's see. Maybe I can pause screen sharing.
All right, I will tee up the next person while you can probably handle one more question.
Sure. I see how difficult it is to find proper representation for VAs. We did most of our searching over Twitter in particular, just for like get a feel for like particular keywords. If you like look through Twitter, if you look for the contacts from your voice director and like general VA communities, like you can narrow it down relatively quickly and like get a feel for the people they want to like have audition. So it's not too hard. It's not a big ask, and I feel like it's generally a good thing to look into, and like it can definitely like pay off, and like it's good to get representation in general, and it's a good goal to aspire to. So I think it's important to do and doesn't take too much time to actually go through the rounds, so it's a good thing.
All right. You guys can totally continue this in chat. I'm sure I see a lot of people asking questions back and forth, which is great. But Katie, you're up.